What's up guys, welcome back to another video. So the last video was about the rate of taxes under the GST. So lot of people watched the video and lot of people also asked me the question relating to the rate of taxes under the GST. And some people also comment on the comment section down below the video that it was a very knowledgeable video and I appreciate it for that. And right at this moment, I also wanted to share with you a little thing that my channel has now crossed over 10,000 views on the YouTube. So it means that I can now monetize my video and the YouTube will also pay for me for that. And right at this moment, my channel is about to cross the 300 subscriber. So it means that my channel is growing very fastly, and I also want to say thank you for all of you who watch my video on the Saturday or Sunday and who also keeps on subscribing or sharing the video. So keep sharing, keep subscribing, keep liking the video. It helped me to motivate the video and in turn which help you to get the knowledge about the GST. And also you can ask the query by sending or dropping the email to sharwangst.148@gmail.com. sharwangst.148@gmail.com. A lot of people asking me the question on a daily basis, and the question is about the 10 or 15 question in a day. So a lot of people asking me and I also reply to that query. So you can also ask the query by sending just an email. I will definitely solve the query as soon as possible. So now coming back to our topic, in this video we will going to discuss about the valuation under GST. So there are two provisions which is relating to the valuation. First one is the section 15 of the CGST Act and second one is the valuation rule. You see, a lot of time the valuation which you do or the value which you charge from the customer cannot be accepted under GST because a lot of reason, like when the sale or purchase is between the related person or when you exchange some item in exchange for the sale. So suppose you sell a phone for and it is worth for 20,000 rupees and you also exchange it for the old or the used phone. Suppose the worth of the phone is 20,000 and you also receive the old phone and you just decrease the price for that phone for almost 4,000 rupees. So how to value that transaction, the GST, that will tell in the GST valuation rule. So there are also a lot of situations in which we have to look at the valuation rule apart from section number 15. So in this video we will take the Q&A on the valuation under GST. So without any delay, let's start. So this is our first question of this Q&A and it is about the valuation of goods or services in the normal case. And the question is, what is the value of taxable supply to be adopted for the levy of GST? So the question is, for the levy of GST, what will be the value of the supply of goods or service? So in the normal case, the valuation will be done under section 15 subsection 1 and it says that the value of supply of goods or services shall be the transaction value, which is the price actually paid or payable if the supplier and the recipient are not related and the price is the sole consideration. So there are 2 or 3 things on which we should focus on. First one is that the value of supply of goods or services shall be the transaction value. So in the normal case, the value will be the transaction value. Transaction value means the value on which the supplier or recipient transact. So whatever will be the value of that transaction will be considered as the valuation of goods or services. And the transaction value, either it is paid at the time of transaction or it may be payable at the future date. So whatever will be the transaction value, whether it is to be paid at the time of transaction or whether it is to be paid in the future or after the transaction, that will be the value of supply of goods or services. But the transaction value can be adopted only when the 2 conditions will be satisfied. First one is that the supplier and recipient are not related. The supplier and recipient should not be related, and if not related, then only we can take the transaction value. And the second condition is that the price is the sole consideration for the transaction value. So now, what is the meaning of the related person? So when we can say that we are related? So there is an explanation which is attached to section number 15 and in which a lot of category of the related person is mentioned. So if you look at the definition or the explanation, the related person is when the person shall be deemed to be related if such person are officer or director of one another's business. That is the first point. And second point is that the such person are legally recognized partner in the business. Third one is that such persons are employer and employee. So similarly there are 8 points in which we can say that those persons are related. So if you want to know about the related person, then check out that explanation, and if you have the query related to the related person, then you can send me an email. I will give you the explanation, I will give you that kind of stuff. So the first situation is that when the supplier and recipient are not related. So if you are not related, then the transaction value will be taken as the valuation of goods or services. And the second situation is the price is a sole consideration. So when we can say that the price is sole consideration, or when we can say the price is not the sole consideration. So now like we take the example in which the price of the mobile was 20,000 rupees, but there is an exchange offer. So the price of the mobile is 20,000 rupees, but the supplier gave the exchange offer, like when you give us the old mobile, then we will sell you the mobile to around 14,000 or 15,000 rupees. So in this case the price is not a sole consideration. The consideration also involve the exchange with the old mobile. So in that case the transaction value, like in that case the transaction value of 14,000 or 15,000, we will not take the transaction value, we will move on to the rules. So in case when the price is not the sole consideration, we will move on to the valuation rule. And another example when the price will be not the sole consideration is when suppose you went to a restaurant or the 5-star hotel and the bill is around 5,000 rupees, but you have only the 3,000 rupees in your pocket. So what will we do? You will say, okay sir, I don't have the money, but I can wash the dishes, I can wash the plates. So in that case also, when you wash the dishes or you wash the plates in exchange for the remaining balance, so in that case also the price is not the sole consideration, because your service of washing the plate also involved in the transaction value. So in that case also the valuation will be done as per the valuation rule. So that are the two examples in which we can say that the price is not a sole consideration. And the second one, the first one is about the supplier recipient are not related, and if you want to know about the related meaning, then check out the explanation which is appended or given under section 15 subsection 1. So if the supplier and the recipient are not related and the price is only the sole consideration, then only the transaction value can be taken as the value of supplier goods or service. The next question is very logical and a lot of people might be thinking right now, and the question is why contract price is not sufficient to determine the valuation of supplier. So as we discussed in the previous question, we have to move on to the valuation rule when the certain conditions are not satisfied as per section 15 subsection 1, and the price is not the sole consideration, and when the supplier and recipient are the related one. So in those cases, like the first one is that when the price can be influenced by the factors like the relationship of the parties. So when there is a relation between the party, like you are a family member, you are employer and the employee, or you are the partner in the business, so in that cases you are the related. The law says that you are the related, and those relations can influence the price of the supply goods or services. So in that case we cannot take the transaction value or the contract value. The contract value can be say as the transaction value. So because the price can be influenced by factors like the relationship between the parties, so therefore we can't take the valuation as per the contract price or the transaction value. And the second situation is when sometimes the law says that supplier goods or services is the supplier goods or service under GST. So the transactions are deemed to be supply under the GST, and there are a lot of cases in which the law says that supply is the supply of goods or services under GST, and the law says that is a deeming provision, and the schedule 1, 2, 3 deals with that. So when the transactions are deemed to be supply under GST which do not have any prices. So suppose the branch transfer and the stock transfer under GST is the supply of goods or services under GST, and suppose you have the one branch in Delhi and the one branch in the Uttarakhand, and when you are just transferring the stock between those two branches, then also the law says that it will be treated as the supply of goods and you have to pay tax under their case. So in that case we know that it is a deeming section, that the supply of branch transfer will be supply goods or service under GST, but we don't have any price for that because we don't charge the price for just supplying the goods or services goods between the branches. So in that case also we don't have any price to value. So in that case also we have to look at the valuation rule, because in that case we don't have any price to look on this value. So therefore when the transactions are deemed to be supply under GST but we don't charge any price for that, then also we need to go on to the valuation rule to calculate what will be the value of goods under that cases. The third one is when the price is not sole consideration. So suppose in the previous example we take that where there is an exchange of goods or services between the parties, or when there is a situation in which you sell the goods and the recipient in turn give you the service back, then in those cases we know that the price is not sole consideration. So therefore we can't take the transaction value or we can't take the contract price in that case. So these are the situation and these are the reason why the contract value will not be taken as the transaction value in some cases, and therefore we have to move on to the valuation rules. The next question is relating to the inclusion or exclusion from the value as determined under section 15 subsection 1 and the valuation rule. The question is whether there is any inclusion or exclusion the supplier need to consider for valuation of supply of goods or service. So the question is whether you need to also consider the inclusion or exclusion from the value as determined under section 15 subsection 1 or as determined under the valuation rule. So after considering the provision of section 15 subsection 1 or the valuation rule, you have the value for the supply of goods or services as per the GST. But the question is whether there is any inclusion or the exclusion from that value. Inclusion mean the certain kind of amount which you need to add to the value as determined under section 15 section 1 and the valuation rule. So whether there is any inclusion or the exclusion which you need to consider after taking care, after considering the provision of section 15 section 1 or the valuation rule. So the answer is yes, there is certain kind of amount which you need to add or deduct from the value as considering after provision of section 15 subsection 1, and that one is given under section 15 subsection 2. So there are 4 inclusions which is to be given under section 15 subsection 2, and the first inclusion is that tax duty cess fee which is charged under any law, if it is charged separately in the invoice, that is to be included in the valuation of goods or services, but the tax duty charge or fees should not be under the CGST Act, ITGST Act, UTGST Act or the compensation cess. So if there is any tax duty or fees which is charged under any law other than CGST, ITGST, UTGST or compensation cess, then those taxes or duty will be included in the price, in the value of the goods or services, but that cess, duty, tax should be separately indicated in the invoice. The second inclusion is that the any amount that the supplier is liable to pay, which the supplier is liable to pay under the contract, but which has been incurred by the recipient of supply of goods or services, and that value, the amount which the recipient of supply of goods or services incurred from his pocket is not included in the value of goods or services. So in certain cases sometimes happens that under the contract the liability of certain kind of expenses was of the supplier, but the recipient of supply of goods or services pay that amount or incur that amount from his pocket, and the expenses which the recipient of supply of goods or services pay from his pocket is not included in the invoice which is issued by the supplier. So in that cases where the recipient to supplier goods or services incur certain kind of expenses, then those expenses which is incurred by the recipient will also be included in the valuation of goods or services. So the example would be like under the contract, the liability to transport. The liability to transport is of the supplier of goods. The liability to transport is of the supplier of goods, but the recipient of goods incurred those expenses because he says that I have the transportation agency, or I have some contract, I have some contact to make the goods available in my factory. So instead of transportation by the supplier, the transportation is done by the recipient of goods. So in that case, whatever expense which is to be done by the recipient of goods will be included in the valuation of goods, which is to be included in the valuation of goods, and whatever amount will be the we have to consider that amount of transportation charges which is to be paid by the recipient of good will be included in the valuation of goods under GST. So that is also example in which the recipient incurs some kind of expenses, but the liability of which was of the supplier. The liability of which was of a supplier. So in that cases, those expenses which incurred by the recipient will be included in the valuation of goods or services if the supplier doesn't have any idea that how much amount this recipient has paid, or the invoice doesn't include that amount. So in that case, we have to also add up those kind of expenses which incurred by the recipient, but the liability of which was of supplier. So we have to also add up this. Third one is about the incidental expenses like the packaging charges, transportation charges, or the commission. So that kind of incidental charges which is incidental to the supply of goods or as a service will be also included in the value of supply of goods or service. And the fourth one is that the interest, late fees, or the penalty which is related to the delay payment of the consideration will also be included in the valuation of goods or service. And the value of supply of goods or services also exclude the discount which is to be given before or at the time of supply of goods or services if such discount is especially mentioned in the invoice. So if the discount is issued before or at the time of supply, and if the discount amount is mentioned in the invoice, then that will be excluded from the valuation of goods or services. And if the discount is given after the supply of goods or services, so when the discount is given after the supply of goods or services, then the discount will be excluded only if the discount is mentioned in the contract, and when the contract is entered before or at the time of supply, and the input tax credit which is attributable to such discount will be reversed by the recipient of such supply of goods or services. So when the discount is given before or at the time of supply of goods or services, then the discount will be excluded if the amount of discount is mentioned especially under the invoice. And if the discount is given after the supply of goods or services, then the discount will be excluded from the value of supply of goods or services if the discount is mentioned under the contract, and when the contract is entered before or at the time of supply of goods or services, and the input tax credit attributable to such discount is reversed by the recipient of supply of goods or services, then in those cases discount will not be included in the value of supply of goods or service. Alright guys, so this is our part first of the valuation of goods or services under GST. The video would be too long if I would cover the valuation of goods or services as per the valuation rule. So you have to check out the part 2 of valuation of goods or services under GST. So in the part 2, we will discuss about how to value the goods or services as per the valuation rule. So if you want to check out the part 2, then click right here. And if you want to subscribe the channel, then click right here. Alright guys, so see the part 2.